Today we are talking about how you can have healthy expectations in your relationships. We're talking about dating both before you're married, after you're married. COVID life brings all sorts of complications to it. We're glad you're with us for another episode of Tekoa Talks.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that is hard, especially for women, is sometimes we have expectations in our head that we don't communicate, and making sure that we articulate that is something for me in friendships, in dating life, and in married life. I've had to make sure that I guard my heart in that, because I found there are times where I become bitter towards somebody without even realizing it. And it's because in my head, I had this grandiose, like, Valentine's Day was going to be flowers and this 5-course meal and all the things. And then when it was a date night in, which was still a great date, it didn't live up to the expectations. And now all of a sudden I'm bitter because it wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Even though it was your fault.
Yes. But also, no, it is. And I think that sometimes we do this with friendships, with a dating life. We see other people and we start to compare. Oh, well, they had that. Why don't I have that? And then you start building these expectations that aren't realistic. And then we're just let down.
Yeah, I think the two things you mentioned there about communicating our expectations is huge with our significant other, whether we're married or not married. And that goes for both men and women. We do it sometimes too. I'll admit, at least I do it. I think it goes both ways, even though women maybe have the stereotype of doing it more. And then I think the other thing you mentioned was about how we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to other people. I think that's like a huge negative input that can lead to improper expectations of, you know, what we saw other people doing on Instagram.
Right.
And we're like, well, my date wasn't that good. Like, why didn't my significant other plan whatever that was when we had an amazing day?
Right. And I think that that's so hard in social media life, especially. You see the little square of people's lives and you don't see the rest. Maybe they had a huge fight before that dinner or whatever. And I'm not saying that it's not healthy to fight, but like the reality is you're only seeing a little bit of it. And I think the more we can be open in communication in any relationship helps us to have a better relationship. Because the reality is we're all made different and have different expectations and different realities. We have different likes, we have different interests. And so a date that you and Allie go on, I might think like, oh, good for you. But for me, like, that's not something I'm interested in. But for you guys, it was the best date ever. And that's amazing. And I think it's worth celebrating when people are doing things to recognize like, hey, that's great that you're dating your spouse, or hey, that's great that you planned that grand date for somebody. But to stop and recognize like, what do you need for your specific relationship is probably different than somebody else. And we just need to let those expectations go.
Also, some people are really good at editing photos. And real life is just not what it looks like in the photo.
Right. We're not going to talk about the fact there's a stack of Duplos over there in the room. You just see the...
Yeah, you don't see the messy life of my kids that's around me. You just,
Right.
see what's on screen. And sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes it's not a good thing.
Right.
Um,
But yeah, I think the more that we can be honest with ourselves and communicate that with whoever we're dating, we're married to, our friends, whatever season of life we're in, the healthier we will be and the healthier they will be. And in the long term, it'll be a better relationship and we will be more satisfied.
Before we move on from that, the thing I wanted to talk about with expectations as well is that communication piece is something you have to revisit throughout your relationship.
Yes.
I know what Allie and I did when we were dating, even our first couple years of marriage, like for Christmas, for example, or holidays are a big one, or birthdays or different things. That's changed over time, and and we've established, okay, this is kind of what we do, but do you still feel good about that? Because sometimes your emotions change, and if you don't re-communicate that or you don't revisit the topic of, I actually wish we did exchange gifts and we haven't for the last 3 years or whatever it might be. And as a guy, I want to make sure that the gift I'm exchanging is at the right, I'm meeting the expectations of it's the right proportional amount of gift. And, it's helpful if you talk about those things versus just keeping it silent to yourself. And so I think expectations are huge, especially when it comes to holidays like Valentine's Day or other things.
Well, and I think that that's a good point too, of expectations around gift giving, because I think sometimes you might be like, oh my gosh, this was the best gift ever, and it wasn't that big of a gift, and then they give you a big gift, and then now you feel guilty and so then that adds like a whole other level of complexity. But I think recognizing different seasons calls for different things. Maybe you're in a saving season where you're looking to buy a car, buy a house, whatever, and so gifts are going to be different, and that doesn't mean that it's bad, it's just different. or you just had a kid and so now you're bringing them into the mix. So what does Valentine's Day look like with your kids? Or maybe your kids have now gone off to college and they're not around anymore. So whatever season you're in, things may be changing. And I think it's really cool to set new traditions and start new things, but sometimes you just have to be honest again and go back to it and go, hey, actually, I'm kind of bummed that we didn't do gifts this year. Hey, can we do that next year? And be able to vocalize that and create a safe place that you can talk about that.
That's good. I think it leads right into talking about what we do for dates, even, with each of our spouses, or, what you might do with your significant other, and how that changes season to season, and how, having the proper expectations for that even can be healthy. What you might be trying to do to impress your date on the first date is different than what you might be doing later on. And we still need to be dating. It's so important to date who we're in a relationship with and continue to do that. And I think in COVID life, we've all had to get more creative.
Right.
And some of us haven't, unfortunately. And I know I've done better and worse at that at different parts of the last year. But we need to have the right expectations. We need to keep dating and be creative with our spouse. And I know one of the things that's been really healthy for Allie and I in our relationship is that we look more at the intentionality of the other person than what the actual date was. Like, the win for us is not whether it was the best date they've ever planned for us, or it was the thing of our dreams that we hadn't communicated that we were hoping they would do. And it's great when all the stars align and it works out. Don't get me wrong, like, everybody loves a good date. But did the other person go, spend the time to plan something, to be intentional about, like, okay, we're doing this for dinner and it's in our backyard, or, I'm, taking care of Hannah and putting her down and giving my wife, some extra space, and, like, I set up a game for us to play at the table and, picked out some music or whatever it is to just enjoy a night together. Like, maybe that was my wife's favorite date, maybe it was her least favorite, but if I went out of my way to plan, like, that communicates care for her. And I think that's something that if you can incorporate into that, your relationships, whatever relationship it is, that idea of, hey, we're going to look at the care the other person put into it, that can bring a lot of life to your relationship.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've tried really hard, especially after having our son, Dougie, was making sure we were consistent. And I think it's so easy that date night takes the back burner and that there's just this expectation that the person's just going to be around and things are going to be great, but to really make sure to protect and carve out that time that we get together. And I think especially in COVID life, it gets even harder. Okay, things are closed and finding a sitter and all the things. Or if you're just in normal dating life and you don't have all the other things, like, how do you find a safe space to be together that you both feel comfortable and all of the things? But I think the more we can be consistent and carve that time out, it's better for our relationship to have conversations, to have the time where it's just the two of you and you are able to catch up and talk about life and all the things, or share what's going on at work or whatever the case may be, but making sure to be consistent with that, because I think it's so easy. And there were seasons of our life where we would go months without dating, and then we were starting to fight more and other things were happening and we were like, what's going on? And then, through some wisdom of other people, we realized, like, oh, we haven't had a date night in a while. We haven't had that time to be intentional with each other, to recognize the care from one another, to set expectations with each other, to just connect. And so we really miss that. And so now we try as much as possible. Granted, things happen. It's COVID life. You never know what's going to happen, but really trying to be intentional about protecting that time, carving out that time, and using whatever time we do get for date night.
Before we finish, let's just share, what are a couple dates we've done with our spouses in COVID life that might be something other people could take as an idea? Maybe you're watching this, you get a leg up on your significant other.
We just recently went to the drive-in, and we haven't been to the drive-in like decades. It's been a hot second, and it was really fun. Like, we went and got some candy, we brought dinner, we had pillows and blankets, and, like, it was just fun to go watch a movie and hang out. And it was nice to get out of the house and not just watch a movie at home, but to, like, be out and pretend like the world is normal again. So check out your local drive-in. They've got tons of showings, and it was super safe. There was space and all of the things.
That's good. Yeah, one of the things we've done recently is, we've done this multiple times, I guess, but, picking up food and then going to a park, and going somewhere different, and even, like, just people watching together as we eat our food.
It's my favorite sport.
This last time we did it, there were people that set up, like, a whole bouncy mat and we're doing gymnastics, like 3 people doing gymnastics in the park. And we got to laugh and have fun, and I had a hike planned at the end of the date, and I'm sharing it with Allie as we're on the motorcycle going over there, and she's like, actually, I've done this one and it wasn't very good. And that goes back even to what I was sharing before of the intentionality of, for her, it wasn't that this was the best hike we've ever done. It was, oh, Austin planned a hike for us, and we got to do it,
Right.
and we got to spend a little time together. And it wasn't horrible. We walked, and there was nature, and
We're
there was
outside breathing some fresh air. Yeah.
and so it was good. And so I think those are things that you could do as well. Go to the drive-in, go pick up food, and go to a park, or stay in. I
Yeah.
think we've both done dates inside with our spouses or in our backyards of, okay, the kid's down and we set aside this time. So I think intentionality is a big thing to even maybe leave people with of, be intentional. And if you are, because then you can put the phones away, and you can, even if you're at home, you can set aside like a different space and a different time and still have that date and time together.
Yeah. And we'd love to hear from you guys. What are dates that you're doing this season? I think the more we can share with each other and help each other out, like,
I can use some tips.
No shame in that. But make sure to subscribe below and click the like button, because we want to hear from you guys and we want to stay connected. So see you guys next time for our next Tekoa Talk.